right. Welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. This is your host, Marianela Medrano. I am the founder of Palabra Training Center, where words are giving us medicine. And today, my guest is Jamie Figueroa, and boy, I'm happy. She is a Boricua sister, self-described as Afro-Taína, like me, but she is via Ohio, by way of Ohio. She is the author of the critically acclaimed novel Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer, a powerful statement on recovering from colonialism and other isms, in my view. Jamie is a longtime resident of northern New Mexico. Her writing has appeared in American Short Fiction, Emergence Magazine, Elle, McSweeney's, and Agni, among others. She received a Truman Capote Award and was a Bread Loaf Scholar. Criticism of her work has appeared in the New York Times and other venues. Jamie received an MFA in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts. There is so much I can say about Jamie Figueroa, my long lost sister, but she's found. I found her, or she found me. I don't remember, but we found each other. And so I'm not gonna say more about her bio. You can read that online. I'm going to dive into questions that will unveil much more about Jamie to you. So Jamie, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be with you.
Yes.
I appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation with you that others can listen in.
Yes, that's the awesome part, right? That we can have fun now, and then other people can then just watch at their lecture, what is it that I'm trying to say? At their pleasure, time, and everything. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer. To me, this novel conceals so much from cover to cover, with its many bellies. Grief, for instance, lies beneath so many of the dialogues, as well as the longing and the feeling of being uprooted, of living in between worlds, in between realities, and at the margins, living at the margins. When we think about the power of words, which is the core theme of this podcast, I cannot help but wonder how much healing, because the power of words to heal is my premise here. Mm-hmm. So how much healing came from writing this novel?
That's a great place to start. It's interesting because even though the details were quite different in many ways from my own life, mm-hmm. what was very much the same was the emotional truth, right? In a way, it's an emotional autobiography. And so the healing happened at a few different levels. The healing mm-hmm. happened because, as you so eloquently put it in your talk with Association of Women in Mythology, writing ourselves, right? Back into history, writing our stories, including ourselves in our own stories, right, has the tremendous power to bring about a sense of fullness and a sense of embodiment where there has been considerable fragmentation that has happened generation after generation. So the ability to include perspectives that are often overlooked, marginalized, silenced, knowing that I had the power of my own hand, the power to choose the perspectives, to choose the words, and potentially the platform when publishing this, to amplify perspectives, presences, voices that are systematically silenced, is a tremendous amount of healing that I can contribute to that, and to the work that many others are doing in that regard, right? That I'm not alone in that. And I think another aspect of healing happened in the creative process, which is very much a sacred act. I believe it's the direct sort of echo of ancestors who conjured and who, could enliven and call out the healing properties of plants and of states of being that would undo harm and reestablish the body's and the psyche's inherent capacity to heal. So I feel like it's that kind of capacity of the sacred act to enter into the unseen, into the world of the imagination, the worlds of the dimensions of the imagination, where all potential and possibility lie, and to be in relationship with that, and with those unseen forms, of which also include ancestors, right? So to come to certain places of writing the book and feel like I need to make a certain thing happen because I'm the writer and there's a plot and there's characters, right? And I am commanding it all. And then to realize very quickly, whenever I took that stance, the whole integrity of the piece would just fall in on itself. Mm-hmm. And I would have to stop and really listen with my inner ear and see with my inner eye and wait to receive what it was that the characters were asking me to share about them, and what were the other elements that wanted and needed to be heard. The perspective of the house, the perspective of, and the presence of the angel, and of the place itself, to listen to the voice in which it wanted to speak and what it wanted to say. All of that was incredibly healing. It was to be in relationship with this work and to feel like this work was affecting me as much as I was affecting it. And I think that that's the best that we can hope for when we're doing this.
Absolutely. So beautiful. So many things you're saying here that are resonating with me. That you're right, that you were writing not so much your personal story, but your emotional truth. Mm-hmm. And I'm imagining that that emotional truth was about the what you were saying, the fragmentation that our people endured, that then it was passed down to us through the DNA, and how what you're saying, that writing as an sacred act. Mm-hmm. Of bringing wholeness, of bringing together, and that wholeness through embodiment, through being conscious of how, I mean, we know thanks to neuroscience for the last 100 years, we understood the importance of integration, of, what acts of violence have done in history is to separate us, to sever us from the body, because that's where all the pain feels, where all the history is inscribed, is installed. So of course we want to just be as away as possible from that. So when we approach writing from this perspective of being a practice not only sacred but of integration, then that is healing. That is so resonant with the way I approach writing myself. I'm just a little curious here as to how do you facilitate embodiment? Do you have some rituals, specifics before you do the writing? How do you nest? I call I call that nesting. I invite people to do some nesting before they write. So how do you do it? What are some of your tricks?
Sometimes I feel like, like a dog that has to lay the grass down and go in circles before it lays down, right? So, for me, it's really setting strong intention. Oftentimes before I write, I will light a candle, and it helps me to remember the presence of something eternal, right? And, oftentimes in the writing, when I feel overwhelmed or disconnected, which happens all of the time in the process, it's a real, a quieting and a asking, and asking for guidance, and then asking for an intervention, a collaboration, right? In addition to that, absolutely stretching. I love to do yin yoga and be in a pose for a very long time and feel all of the layers melting away. That because I'm so stiff, it takes so long to open up. And to sort of feel those juicy positions of the body's sort of optimal way of holding itself and articulating itself in space, and also walking. Lots of long walks, and whether they're walks around the neighborhood where I'm sort of talking to myself to get things out of my own head, or walks in nature and sitting on the ground and feeling that connection of closeness, right, with the place where we all originate from and belong to. So there's definitely those really simple and basic movements. And I don't often, at this point in my life, I'm not able to walk as long and as far as I have in the past, or stretch as frequently as I have in the past, because my time is sort of, as much as I can write, as often as I can write, I'm grabbing that time, right? So I have to sort of look at rhythms, and sometimes it's leading up to the days in which I will write. It's getting those walks in and doing that stretching. And then the days of writing sometimes are spent mostly writing, and then coming out of that and knowing how to then take care of myself, which goes back into those movement practices. And I love to dance. And it's one of the things, unfortunately, during this whole time of the pandemic that I do more infrequently, but I can watch how my mind changes. This should tell me I needed to do it more, right? Have little breaks when I'm writing. but I can see and feel how my thoughts and perceptions change the more able I am to move around, and especially move around in a joyful way.
Beautiful. Let's segue into this question I have about your novel. We know time doesn't exist, but we do have to somehow create that notion in order to organize our lives. So time, and I guess the circularity of it, it's very present. And one thing that calls my attention that I want you to expand a little bit is that it happens on the span of 3 days. So why 3 days? Why Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the life of these characters? What is the significance of that choice?
I love that you said we know that time doesn't exist, because I answered that question similarly in another interview, and I was just sort of like, right? This is something that we all know. It's just a construct, especially what gets captured on the face of a clock, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
So in earlier drafts of writing this, it was so dreamlike. That my agent was asking me to put in some handholds for the reader, where they could really understand where we were moving, when and where we were and why, and sort of how the narrative arc progressed. And so I needed to think about how we do construct time and how that helps us to understand what can happen in a day, right, with our physical bodies, and then in our imaginings where we leap from there, and then where we return to, right? So I had to provide a way for the reader to keep track of themselves and of these characters, because the book is asking so much of the reader to hold. And so a couple of things I did in the process of revising it was to create 3 parts, right? And each part is a day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That did a couple of things for me. It helped me to track the characters and what was happening in their lives and where we moved in time. And also it helped me to track this bet that Rufina gives to Rafa, right? That if they make enough money on the plaza, he has to promise that he'll commit to living. Well, at the end of each day, they either get closer to or further away from that goal, right? So it also creates tension within the narrative arc around what's going to happen. Is he going to make it or not? Are they going to get enough money or not? And also, putting a watch on the angel helped immensely, right? Like, out of everyone in the story, who should be wearing a watch? Not the angel, but surprise, there's the angel with the watch. And being able to look at the watch, and the reader can read what's on the watch, on the clock face, and again know where they're at in space and time, because that's changing a lot throughout the novel. So it really was sort of at the craft level, building into time and place and tension and conflict and character development. And it didn't exist early on, and it really needed to. So I was grateful for that sense of structure. And I had a teacher once say that, once you get your structure, which is sort of like, your hanger, right? Then you can put all sorts of things on that, and the integrity of that structure will hold and bear the weight of that.
I'm so glad I asked the question, because especially for young writers to hear this, to hear how important structure is once we do the spilling onto the page, right? Then kind of the restructuring of things. So thank you for going into that. Rafa and Rufina, and by the way, I appreciate, the other thing that I appreciate is the cadence, the rhythm that permeates the novel. And you do it in so many ways, like even with the names, Rafa, Rufina, oh my
Rosalinda.
God, Rosalinda is like, right? So I can't help it but being kind of rock, you know, from one side to the other with just that, just choose that. So, but where I'm going though with my question is that Rafa and Rufina are, again, going back to what I said before, that the bellies of grief are showing in so many ways. I don't know why I call it bellies. It could be face. I don't know, but grief it's showing everywhere. So these two adults are mourning the loss of their mother, but then in the morning, they regress to childhood. They become these needy characters, even though Rufina is this, you know, strong, you know, going forward character, but there is a fear, there is a childishness to what they're doing, even how they are strategizing things. Is that regressing to childhood and almost regressing to the womb, regressing to el vientre, to the amniotic fluid of love? Is that also the returning to the island, the returning to the ancestral home, the ancestral vientre?
Oh, you make me want to cry. You know, the beautiful thing about talking to different readers, right, is the chemistry that happens and all that you bring forward, right? And then the work sort of aspects of the work can appear that they can't with everyone. But yeah, I think absolutely. As I think they watched happen with their mother, right? In Rosalinda's, you know, as she aged and had children and become a mother and sort of make her way in the world in this new place where she was living, there were the aspects of her that were still in her homeland, right? There were aspects of her that were deeply connected with sacred sites that held her knowing in them, right? And I think they sort of watched her behave in that way. And there's a way in which they're mimicking that without the actual experience of that themselves, right? And I think that's also what can happen with generational trauma, is we can find ourselves generations out mimicking behavior that, if we trace it far enough back, has a lot of potency in why it was acting out the way it was acting out. And sometimes the truth of that potency gets lost, right?
You know, we were saying, I think it was before we started recording, that I was talking about how surprising the element of surprise is all over, that's what makes it such a good novel, that you're not predictable in any way. I found myself reading and kind of going along, as I was saying, like it's so, well, the connotation of this dreamy, ludic kind of way of writing is here, but then I will just wake up and it's like, hello, look what she's showing you, look where she's taking you. And you know, the exploder, let's talk about the exploder, this white uninvited guest who just came and installed himself in the house. And then it's the way I see it, it's a colonization of the home. And of both Rosalinda's body and Rufina's body. They were both colonized by these white, uninvited guests, who then begins making these colorful dresses and creating these things for these kids, for the siblings. At the same time, so, okay, he's doing that, but he's the predator. He is the one using them to make money, to make a profit. This character runs parallel to neocolonialism, and white supremacy of Tres Hermanas and beyond. At least that's how I'm reading it. And so the other thing that is so clear to me, the exoticization embodied by these tourists snatching selfies, pictures of things that otherwise are not photographable. Like, who will want to take a picture of this? So we know that this happens. The brown, black bodies are always in the background. And in the case of the Caribbean, the palm trees are always in the background, creating, it's an old theme. So whiteness, colonialism, all these things are poking their head. And I guess my point here is that these are all themes. And even though you treat them in such an innovative way, they're all themes. How is it for you to write about an old tune, let's say, that spreads like weed? It's like everywhere. How was it for you to be, I'm imagining it's a very conscious, savvy, like from the guts, kind of like, I'm gonna write about this, but at the same time, whimsical, right? Like you're making it that is not so obvious, it's not so predictable. We have to kind of like, in my case, I should speak for me, that there were so many times that I will just say, oh my God, here is the theme again. And the way she presented it to me was so new, so different. So again, my question, how was it to write about the old, weed that has been populating? How was it to write so consciously about it, but in such a way that is new? Do you agree with me that can you see that you were able to do that?
Well, I think two things were driving me, two things that I have great interest in. And that is sort of the political, historical avalanche, right, of material that actually happens embodied in familiar relationships inside of the home. And I think that my interest is sort of seeing where and how they play off of each other, right? If you look at a home as a government, right, who are the citizens and who are not permitted to be citizens? What are the ways in which behavior is regulated, right? Who's doing the policing? Who has the different roles in that way? So I like to try to figure out parallels between that which feels not intimate at all to what is actually very much influencing us in the way that we think and behave and consider ourselves and those that we love. Something else that I'm really interested in is women of color and the white men that they sometimes fall in love with, that fall in love with them, and the politics of that. There, of course, are relationships where there's a lot of genuine, sincere loving and connection and vulnerability and intimacy. And then there are relationships where I don't think that is happening. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's between women of color and white men, right? It could be all sorts of different combinations. But that combination in particular, I'm interested in because it was the reality for my mother. For a time, it was my own reality. I have, dear friends and, beloved sisters who also have had a similar experience, even though they identify differently than I do. And there's these, I love that you talk about it as this pervasive we that essentially has happened since contact, right? The Spanish did not bring their wives with them like the English did, right? So here we go. Here it begins. And I'm sure in other ways, right before that as well, and sort of the making of the world and the way in which people moved all around the world. But that in particular is a kind of a wound that still is festering all these hundreds of years later, right? And this, what does love look like, and what does it sound like, and what does it actually mean? How does it behave? And how does these two particular women, the mother and a daughter, who are very much in need of being loved, as we all are, right? And also tilted out of their own authority, tilted sort of off center of their own ability to protect themselves, their own ability to feel a deep connection with themselves, where they come from, who they are, as a protective force to choose then what aligns and what doesn't align, what will contribute to their sense of wholeness and survival, or what will threaten that. All of that is scrambled. And so they are falling prey as victims to someone who is very familiar with what he does and how he does it, right? And who, there also can be this kind of male white character who, because he has studied different peoples throughout the world, believes he actually understands those realities, and he kind of comes in as a teacher, right? I mean, I have this experience at colleges where there would be an older white man professor who would want to tell me who I was because he had studied something of, my people's background. And at the time, I was sort of conditioned to believe I needed to listen to him. And now I think there's sort of nothing could be further from the truth. But it says something about the position that these women were in. And it also says something about what is my reality, what has been my reality, my mother's reality, realities of those, like I said, others that I know of, the kind of colonizing that can happen in relationship under this idea of love, and how we have to navigate that, those intentions and what's underneath what we're saying. It's just, I don't know whether to call it a landmine, a booby trap, a treasure chest. It's just a whole sort of black hole, endlessness, right? Material to draw from. And so that you can be, as a BIPOC, you can be sort of confronted continuously by this ongoing colonization outside of your home, inside of your home, internalized within yourself, right? And in your love relationships.
What I'm thinking, my God, this so much resonate with me, of course, this idea, I guess Baldwin and other people refer to it as the white gaze, and how, we are always under it. And and the mummification. I mean, this is one of my my things in researching, studying, involving myself with our history, our reality, because I think it's important that we demummify ourselves, that we, as Afro-Taínas, that we take our people out of the museums. That's not where we belong. Your novel is an example of that. It gives breath, right? Into statues, into things that otherwise will be statues or artifacts. These become real people. And you capture that so well. I don't know but have you thought of when will you know there is no need to write about this anymore? Because I feel like I can't shake it. I can't, sometimes I have said, I'm tired of like thinking in this mindset, in this frame, but I can't get myself out of it because, the more I read, the more I research, the more I am with people, the more I visit countries with long history of colonizations, the more I see that we're not done. We're not even close to being done. So when will you know?
I'm thinking about one time when I was on Boricua and saw the sign near the river and a bunch of mangroves park. There was a sign, hand-painted sign. Tu eres naturaleza. You say it for me. You said better, right?
Tu eres naturaleza.
Yeah, right. You are nature. We are nature.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So if we start from there, we can see the devastating impact and the misunderstanding that nature is something separate from ourselves, right? That nature is something
that's the fragmentation.
The fragmentation, that nature is something that we extract from, that nature is object, that nature, right? None of those things could be further from the truth, right? And so that is the same lens that then turns to Black and brown people and cannot fully absorb their humanity, right? It's that dominant lens, that imperialistic lens, right? That is still very much animating media, all positions of power. And so when can we stop? I think possibly when every being is held in its full dignity and regarded for its inherent value. And I think that's also sort of losing my train of, there's so many trains of thought
sovereignty. I think the idea of sovereignty that you and I were speaking before, right? It's part of what you're saying.
Yeah,
the recovery.
Absolutely. And something else that you were speaking to about sort of getting tired, I absolutely can relate to what you're saying. There's this sort of feels almost like this endless fuel at times to continue in this way. and to know that mine is a contribution among many that I respect and admire, right? Who've been here with us and continue to be. And I think the thing that can be incredibly tiring for me is to be in conversations, whether it's teaching or it's even being interviewed, from a vantage point that doesn't understand and wants to sort of be spoon-fed these understandings that we have worked so hard for and continue to work so hard for. And when those situations start rolling one after the other, I find myself with a kind of identity fatigue, right? Which is, I am sourcing from my own experience and my own life and memory, the personal, to show examples. This is what colonization looks like. This is what evidence of the patriarchy in our culture looks like on a very micro, personal, intimate level. And doing that kind of translation, it feels like a kind of translation work. Anyone who does translation work knows how exhausting it can be, right? And having to explain and fill in and explain and fill in to those who don't have the lived experience and who are just used to being waited on, can be really draining. It can be really draining.
It's exhausting. Yeah, identity fatigue. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Maybe this is one of the things that caught my attention also, was the use of characters, the organization of characters, and how powerful and astute you were. Sometimes the characters appear with no proper names, as if the reader should know better. For instance, the grandmothers to all. I thought that was brilliant. And the ghost, the smoking angel, like all these, I mean, that's not his name, the angel, but he's con cigarrillos always. The house. When I got to that, Jamie, I was like, my goodness, it's like we are really sisters. Because I have, one of my books is a manuscript still, but it's The House is Human. This idea, right, that spaces have a story to tell, that spaces are in constant interactions with us, that they affirm us in a way, and all that. But that the physical spaces we have inhabited speak about displacement and belonging. So is that what you were aiming to when you were talking about, especially with the house? Like, this house knew so much. This house was taking notes. This house was emoting, like, in such a powerful way. Was that what you were trying to point us to, the idea of both the dichotomy of displacement and belonging?
Yes, absolutely. And also it's similar to that there is no time, right? There are things that I've always felt to be true. now I know we're truly sisters, because it just it doesn't occur to me any other way, right? So then when that happens, then I find a way to fill in what it is that I am intending and what the purpose and the function is. But underneath all of that is just sort of a natural, intuitive connection to an understanding about many things, I guess. But for things in this book, definitely about time and space and time, right? how space and time are shaped by all sorts of different influences, right? I also think about indigenous cosmologies and understandings that overlap into quantum physics, right? There's sort of this deep resonance and knowing and understandings, and the more I talk to people like you and people like Sherry Mitchell and other folks, it just becomes more and more clear that sort of what is common sense to me is sort of comes from, I think, a deeper ancestral lineage of knowing and understanding who we are and how this place that we're in sort of functions.
The ancestral memory.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's also something about naming, right? Who gets to name, whose names were lost, who gets to rename, how we name. Do you just name something after yourself? Right? As we see has happened in many places. Do you name listening with a deep listening and reverence to the place in which you are and asking what it would like to be called? And then what is it called? Then we find names that sound like poetry, right? We find names that have details in them, that have resonance in them. So it's also this kind of pointing at naming and knowing, and what sort of has an authority, right? When you group and create these proper formal names for groups, right? How they become those who hold the power. The original enduring ones hold the power. The grandmothers to all hold the power, right? Ciudad de Tres Hermanas holds the power, not the tourists who have the money, who come through and make those decisions, and not the explorer, people like the explorer. It may seem that way on one hand, but on the other hand, we know better, right? And those that know better have stories to tell and stories that need to be heard.
Yeah, I certainly hope our listeners, if they have not read your novel, will do so. Tell us, as a closing, what are you, what's in the oven? What is cooking? And anything else that you want the audience, the listeners to know? What's in the oven? What are you cooking up, or fermenting or planting, whatever you want to call it?
I actually was writing all day today. I'm feeling a little kind of in an altered state from it. I'm working on a memoir and essays that are of truth and fiction. And so it's very much bending those genres of fiction and nonfiction. And it's sort of has elements of the dream world and of the surreal, but more so it's articulating the many forms of the mother. You know, you talk about getting exhausted around sort of identity. We're talking about that. I find myself always returning to my mother. And so what I have done is, instead of sort of rejecting that as an obsession that I have, right? It's like, no, go deeper in, deeper in, deeper in, deeper in. And where do you find yourself, right? Then suddenly you begin to realize the mother becomes everything, everywhere. And that is, and then that is where I am trying to, constellate and stitch together points of light that throughout my life that have different different experiences and different meaning that, again, are working on two levels, right? They're working on this much larger level at what's happening in the world and what has happened throughout history and who's been able to tell those stories. And then very much the truth of my own mother's life and how it's affected my life. And it sort of moves through that into daughterhood and sisterhood. I'm the youngest of 3 daughters, and then into my own experience of motherhood. And so it's, I hope it's worth reading.
Well, as you are speaking, I'm like praying here for you to have more time and to do the work, because I can't wait to read something from you, something new. This was such an enticing read that I can't wait. So I'm praying for time and space for you to produce and let your imagination and reality. And I love what you're saying, that it's going to be this mixed media of reality and fiction, which I think is to me is the most genuine way. Because if we adhere to what is real, well, what is that? What is real?
Absolutely. It's dependent on whom and what, right? And I think the other thing that happens is when you are told that you don't exist, but you know you exist, right? When you turn towards history books or to institutions of learning and you don't see yourself, there is the understanding that there are alternate and simultaneous realities happening, right? And so that very much has to shape the way in which we think and imagine and create and are able to hold space for ourselves and what's possible.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jamie, for sharing this time with us. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to What a Word is Worth. You can access our episodes at either Anchor or YouTube. And if you are interested, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you find our program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion always.
Muchas gracias, hermana.
Thank you.